The first thing Jackson Cole saw wasn't the heat or the shine of the river in the Arizona sun. It was the pale swirl of red drifting down the stream. Not much, but in a country where water was life, even one drop of blood equaled danger. He reined in his horse, the leather saddle creaking in the stillness. The light off the river hurt his eyes, and for an instant, he believed the sun was tricking him. Then he saw her, face down in the shallows, hair spilled out like black ink in the currents, lay a young Apache woman. Her buckskin dress clung to her, water-heavy and dusty. The beadwork, once vibrant, was dimmed with sweat. One leg was bent abnormally, and a dark blot spread across her side. She was breathing barely. Every rise of her chest struggled against the air itself. Jackson's stomach turned icy cold. This was trouble. The sort of trouble that came home with you and never left. In a place like Prescott, having an Apache in your home wasn't frowned on. It could get you driven out or worse. People wouldn't matter if she was on her deathbed. They'd only notice the enemy. He spurred on. Leave her to the sun, to the coyotes, to the river. That was the way the desert was. You took care of your own and nobody else. But then he remembered Sarah, his 12-year-old daughter, sitting in silence at the dinner table each night. And he remembered his wife, dead 5 years now, smiling at him on the same riverbank, back when things were different. The burning in his chest wasn't just the sun anymore. Jackson swung down, splashing into the water, and scooped the woman up in his arms. She was light, burning hot with fever, and each breath shook as if it could be her last. If he left her here, she wouldn't live to see the morning. If he brought her home, all of his life would be changed. He turned in the direction of his horse. The decision was made. Sweat dripped down his back and his arms were sore from bracing her in the saddle by the time Jackson arrived at the ranch. Sarah stood on the porch, barefoot and still, as if she didn't think she was seeing what she was seeing. Blankets, boil water, was all he muttered as he lifted the stranger into the house. The house was cooler, shaded from the suffocating sun. Jackson put her on his own bed, the only one large enough. Suddenly the room seemed smaller, crowded with something more than heat. Her breathing was shallow, her body hot with fever. Jackson wasn't a doctor, but he had an idea what occurred when blood and dirt became one. He bathed the wound in her side, bound it tight, and splinted her leg with 2 slices of pine and shredded bedsheets. Sarah remained in the corner, hugging her frayed, faceless doll, eyes wide. She couldn't tell if this was a rescue or trouble on their doorstep. The following days moved slowly by. Mornings for working with the cattle, afternoons for visiting the woman, evenings for sitting by the bedside, cleaning bandages, hearing her wheezing breaths. She never opened her eyes, but when she did, they were cold and appraising, measuring him as if weighing his value. She never said a word, not ever. And then came the moment Jackson wasn't ready for. It was late in the afternoon. Golden light flooded the room. Sarah had edged nearer to the bed, still holding tightly to her doll. The woman, frail as she was, picked up a piece of wood from the box of kindling. Hook! And what she did next would change everything. For Jackson, for Sarah, and for the quiet life they thought they knew. Narelli's hands trembled as she reached for the pocket knife on the table. Not from weakness, her eyes were steady, but from the effort of moving slow, deliberate. She flipped the blade open, studying the grain of a scrap of wood from the kindling box. Jackson maintained his attention on the window, feigning not to observe, but his eyes darted back every few seconds. The wind outside brought with it a noise he did not appreciate. Light, distant. Might have been nothing. But in the West, nothing had an unfortunate tendency to become trouble. Narelli's hands moved with quiet precision. The wood began to take shape beneath the blade. Wings spread wide, head tilted as if listening to something only it could hear. A bird caught mid-flight. When she finished, she placed it in Sarah's small hands. The girl turned it over slowly, tracing the curves with her fingertips. And then, she smiled. Not the courteous little smile she flashed at strangers. Not the manufactured one she wore for her father. A true one. the kind that emanated from somewhere deep. Jackson hadn't witnessed that in years. The atmosphere within the room became warmer, softer, felt different. He still had no idea who Naeli really was, or what Tempest might be trailing behind her here. But one thing was definite. The ranch never felt quite the same without her again. And the storm? It was already en route. A week later, Jackson hitched up the wagon. They were low on provisions. Flour depleted, salt barrel cleaned out, and barely enough coffee for one final pot. He didn't like to leave Naeli alone at the ranch while she was still recovering. But when he explained it to her, she sat straight in the chair. Her legs were still tied, but her voice was of a quality that permitted no disagreement. She was coming. Sarah chimed in that she would like to see town, too. And so it was Jackson had himself driving into Prescott with both of them riding with him. The town itself seemed the same as ever. Dust Street, horse and whiskey smell hanging in the air, men lounging lazy against the saloon rail. But the moment they walked into Henderson's general store, the atmosphere changed. They were watched, some with curiosity, some with frost. A man made a comment to his friend, and both of them snickered covertly. Jackson could feel the soldier in him rouse, heat creeping up his neck. They loaded the wagon in silence. But just as Jackson secured the final sack of flour, trouble emerged from the saloon. Cole Harding, big, broad, cruel because he liked it. 3 others appeared, gliding like shadows. Cole's smile crossed Jackson's, but his eyes drifted to Naeli, and remained there. He spoke something low, cutting. Jackson didn't respond, just informed him the supplies were paid for and they were leaving. Cole stepped closer, boots scuffing the dirt, the kind of standoff where the street gets quiet and the air feels heavy enough to choke you. Jackson knew from the look in his eyes, this wasn't over. They rolled out of town without another word. Sarah sat between them, unusually quiet. Then Jackson saw her small hand reach for Naeli's, and Naeli take it. Something stirred in him. Trouble was coming. No doubt about it. But perhaps, just perhaps, something to fight for was along with it. Hook. And when that trouble did make its way to their doorstep, the battle wouldn't be merely about survival. It would be about family. 3 days since their jaunt to Prescott, the heat stuck to the ranch like a suffocating blanket. Even the wind had abandoned them. Jackson was in the corral, securing a hinge, when he spotted it. Dust churning up from the ridge. For riders riding hard, he didn't need to look closer. Cole Harding was in the lead. The other 3 spread out behind him, guns at their sides, close to their hands. Jackson strode towards the porch, slow but steady, already thinking through the chances. For men, 1 rifle, a recovering woman, and a 12-year-old girl. Naeli came out before he could say a word. The heavy metal poker from the fire pit was in her hand like she'd been born to hold it. Sarah followed close on her heels, eyes wide, but jaw clenched, just like her mother's had. Cole held back by the well, sporting that smile that never reached his eyes. He bellowed something about reclaiming what was the law's. Jackson didn't take the trouble to ask what law. He simply informed them in no uncertain terms. They were trespassing, and it was time to head back. Cole chuckled, a low, humorless sound, pushing his horse forward. A finger of one of his men grazed the handle of his revolver. That was when Sarah stepped into motion. She emerged from behind Naeli, standing directly in front of both of them, and shouted. Not the scream of terror. This one was thin, intense, slicing through the thick air like a knife. The riders stilled. Even Cole's horse shied away. Jackson didn't waste it. He cocked the rifle and fired, just beyond Cole's head. The shot shattered the air, shattering a post behind him. Cole's sneer faltered. He recognized now the unblinking gun, the unmoving stance. This was no bluff. This was a man who would not think twice about shooting again. With a hard jerk on the reins, Cole urged his horse around. His men trailed after him, cursing as they rode over the crest of the ridge. The silence came back, but it wasn't secure. Trouble had just gauged the distance to his front door, and it would return. The days that followed passed like the calm before a summer storm. Life went on. cattle to feed, gardens to water, and Sarah's laughter started to insert itself into the silence of the ranch once more. Naeli was walking now, slow and steady without a crutch. She added a warmth to the place Jackson hadn't known was lacking. Food tasted better when she prepared it. The air seemed less heavy when she sang in that gentle Apache voice, repairing shirts or weaving baskets. It was early evening one night, the sun pouring gold over the sky. Jackson stood on the porch and watched Sarah and Naeli in the garden. Sarah gestured to the corn, already taller than the fence post. Naeli laughed, head thrown back in the last light of day. Sarah turned toward the porch, caught Jackson staring, and smiled. A knowing smile. Then she said loudly, "Mama would want you to be happy." The words struck deep. In that moment, Jackson knew this wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about living. Sometimes the toughest battles aren't fought with bullets. They're won by opening your house and your heart when the world says shut them. Out here, family isn't always blood. It's who you stand with when trouble arrives. So ask yourself this: if you were standing in Jackson's shoes that day down at the river, would you have halted? Would you jeopardize the peaceful life you'd created to save a stranger? And do you think love can overcome the burden of old resentments? If this tale hit something within you, hit a like so more people see it. And subscribe, because out here in the Old West, every path leads to the next tale. And you won't want to miss the next ride.